Hi, have you ever wondered how to become a more effective leader and then wondered, okay, so how do I get there? Well, no worries, you've come to the right place. I am Eugene Dilan, a licensed clinical psychologist with over 27 years of consulting with organizations in every sector that you can think of, from defense and nuclear space to pharmaceuticals and nonprofits and social networks. And over the span of all those years, I've observed and been a part of all kinds of teams and organizations. And so I'm going to share some of my favorite insights. And by the way, the fifth one that I'm going to share with you is probably my favorite. So hang in there with me a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off and say that I think it's important to first define what leadership is. And what I'll say about leadership is that it's really about a role, although it sometimes isn't a formal role. It can be an informal role, but it's about the people who really show you the course in terms of where it is that you're trying to get to. These are the people that help you to set priorities. These are the people who influence in the service of trying to achieve certain goals. And so if you're wondering, whether or not you're a leader, whether you have a title or don't have a title, if you can say yes to any of the things that I just said, you're probably a leader. So in terms of the 5 things that I want to kind of go over that I think would be really helpful, the first one really has to do with values. And so what I'll say about values is that ultimately values drive behavior, conscious or unconscious. And it's not always the organizational values. In fact, I would say that sometimes when we're under stress, we probably default to our personal values. And so as part of, I think, of being a really good leader, understanding what your personal values are and how those might show up at different times might actually help you to manage yourself a whole lot more effectively. Similarly, organizational values. I cannot say how often these are words on a piece of paper or on a website that have no meaning. And sometimes organizations will have 9 or 10 of them and no one can remember more than 2 or 3. And so values are very important. And so why are they important? Again, because they drive behavior. And so if you're trying to shape the culture of an organization, and culture is really a way of thinking about that is the way that we do things around here. If you're trying to shape the way that people do things in an organization, having values that are actionable, that are concrete, that are memorable, that are listed short enough that people can quickly respond to can be really helpful. Additionally, values are helpful when you're experiencing difficult times, when you're having to lay people off or make a tough decision of any kind, going back to those values to make sure that you are living up to them. And while you may not be perfect, aspirationally, you're always, I think, wanting to strive in that direction. So again, values are important because they drive behavior. If you want to shape the culture of an organization, then you want to make sure that you have the right values in place. And remember that it's important that they not be top down. In fact, it's always even better if they're organic in that you've included not just your team members, but the greater organization, sometimes even your clients or customers. Their perceptions of you or the community that you sit in can be helpful in terms of helping to shape what your values are. So I'm going to leave that one there, and I'm going to move on to the concept of managing change. We live in a world where change is happening faster. In fact, every day I think it gets faster. And organizations have always had to deal with change. And in fact, many organizations like Kodak, who didn't respond to change, and ended up being rendered irrelevant. And so it's important to be able to manage change, but change isn't easy. For a lot of people, as you may or may not know, it really does bring up a lot of, I think, fear. It's not uncommon for people when they hear about a major change in the organization to immediately think, what about me? How is this going to impact me? And so leaders really need to think about proactively how they introduce a change, whether it's top down or whether or not you're including people and helping to define what the path forward is. And I can tell you that my experience has been that when people help to shape the future, they have ownership, they feel less threatened. And so very important to include people. Inevitably, however, in change, there's going to be some people who express resistance in some kind of a way, sometimes directly and sometimes in a passive-aggressive way. And what's important as a leader is not to come down on that very hard. In fact, as a clinical psychologist, I would say that the best way, I think, to address change is to lean into it. Resilience is to lean into it. And so what I would say that means is that you want to talk to people and you want to explore it. Where is the resistance coming from? So sometimes it's very simple in that people just need to understand the rationale. And sometimes it's simple in that people just want to feel heard. They want to know that whatever their concerns are have been considered. And so I'm going to leave that one there. And I'm going to move on to resilience, which is very closely linked to the idea of managing change. Because inevitably in organizations, the more that we can cultivate resilience in ourselves as leaders, as well as in our people, I think we're going to be able to pivot and be a little bit more agile and be able, I think, to focus more on the lessons learned versus on the, oh, woe's me, I've been hurt or left out or not considered. And so I would say resilience in a lot of ways is what allows organizations, I think, to thrive. So what is resilience? There are many definitions out there. But you know, the simplest definition I can probably give you is the ability to bounce back. You have a difficult moment and you hopefully spend a little bit of time reflecting. You capture your lessons learned and you focus your energy on the things that you can actually do differently. So where does resilience come from? There are many ideas about where it comes from. For me personally, I think community is really helpful. Sometimes knowing that I'm not the only one and knowing that I have places where I can go and talk to people and at least feel heard and supported can go a very long way. If you think about people who are struggling with addiction or people who are struggling with grief, there's all kinds of groups. And so we know that as social beings, we really, I think, derive benefit. And in fact, there's neurological things that happen when we have connection with people that can really help us. And so community, very big element, I think, of being able to, develop resilience. And so helping people to build those connections in the workplace can go a long way. Another element of resilience that I think is really important is helping people to find meaning. So often we can't change what's happened, but if we can somehow, again, capture the lessons learned, it can help us to move forward versus when we're sitting there struggling with trying to understand the whys. And you know, what I'll say in my personal experience is that the meaning of certain events in my life have changed over time, because as I grow and learn, I sometimes go back and rewrite. But what's important in the moment of a significant event is to, in that moment, be able to find some meaning so that this is how you're able, I think, to move forward from it. Another thing that's really important, I think, in terms of resilience is helping people to develop the skills to calm themselves, to come back to center, whether that's going for a walk, deep breathing, yoga, meditation, prayer, whatever it might be that helps someone, again, to bring themselves back to center so they can go back to, I think, being able to do some good thinking from the neocortex, from that logical thinking part of the brain, because in the moment when you're experiencing that event, there's a good chance you're going to get triggered and be caught up in emotion. And so those are some of the things that I would say are important, and those are skills that can be taught. And so there's an opportunity there for you as a leader to make sure that you're developing those skills, but also to ensure that the people that you're leading are developing those skills. And tip number 4 that I want to share is really self-awareness. Self-awareness is just so important as a leader. As you probably know, if you currently are a leader, is that we don't often get feedback, and if we do, it's not direct. And so we kind of have to be a little bit mindful and intentional around seeking out feedback, whether it's a formal or informal process. And so you might say, well, why is self-awareness important? Because we really do, I think, influence those around us when you're in a leadership position. And so it's important to understand the impact that we're having, because if we're demoralizing people right at the moment when we're needing to motivate them, then we're kind of working at odds with ourselves. This is your instrument. The way that you show up is your tool in terms of the way that you lead people. And so I would say, again, the more awareness that you have, in the words of Daniel Goleman, the more effectively you're going to be able to self-manage, that you can bring forth those elements that are going to serve you and the people in front of you the most at any particular moment. And I think that this is also important because if you think about even just reading the room. Recently I was facilitating a workshop, and I could tell that there were frustrations. I could also tell at one point that people were just extremely tired. And of course, my job is to bring those out, and I do. But sometimes what I see is that leaders are not reading those moments, and not reading the behavior. And so again, through self-awareness, I think that we can begin to recognize what's the impact that I'm having in real time, so that we can make better choices, and again, be able to have our intentions and our impact match more effectively. And then lastly, what I said was going to be my favorite tip of these is really the importance of developing others. Nobody accomplishes anything alone. We live in a global society, community, and so really it's about, I think good leaders really are helping to pave the path for the people that they lead. So what can I say in terms of examples of this? Is that I think that when you spend time and money investing in other people, it becomes easier to do your job. A leader's job more often than not is not to focus on the doing, but to focus, I think, on clearing the path, clearing the obstacles, and helping people to develop the skills to execute more effectively. And so in terms of developing others, I worked with an organization here in Marin County where they made a huge investment over 4 or 5 years to develop their people. And what I'll say is that whereas they struggled with managing change and holding people accountable, that investment paid off because the leaders began to, on their own, initiate change, on their own plan out how it was that they were going to execute in a way that would help people to feel empowered and included and seen and valued. And so I cannot say enough how developing others makes your job easier. And I've often heard people say that you will never be promoted until you've successfully created a team that can step in. And so for that reason, I also think it's also really important to develop people. And I also think it's important to develop people because I think that people feel valued and respected when you invest in them. And I also think that it helps them to have choices as they go forward. It's very demoralizing to be doing the same thing day in, day out, week, month, year. And so giving people the opportunity, I think, to learn more increases their chances, I think, of adding value in greater ways to you. And if not for you, at some point, it's someplace else. And so for that reason, again, I think that developing others is really important. So I'm going to leave that there and say, please do reach out if you want to learn more around leadership development. We develop custom programs from scratch, grounded in your values. We can make them short, we can make them long, depending on your budget. We can create asynchronous content if that is helpful. So please do reach out if you want to learn more about leadership development. Thank you.